Watch this. On the cusp of crisis standards of care.
I remain very concerned. For the Treasure Valley, for the Magic Valley, for the entire state.
Which is why the city of Boise decided to do something about it. The cost of childcare is forcing some parents to make the tough decision. It's also revealing the inner workings of what some have long called a flawed and broken system. President Biden said he almost planted roots in Idaho. Did he, though? We're fact-checking the fact-checkers.
Hospitalizations in Southwest, Central, and South Central health districts, which includes the Treasure Valley and the Magic Valley, are reaching a critical point. Without a change in direction, crisis standards of care are imminent.
Imminent, as in about to happen. Not like maybe it could happen, but about to happen. Timing is the only question left, according to Jepsen and other medical experts in the Treasure Valley. Could be any time, days from now or moments from now. What we know for sure, this surge hasn't let up for area hospitals. Director Jepsen says over this past weekend, a weekend that saw a Boise State football game, art in the park, and a Pride Fest, Treasure Valley Hospital saw more than 60 new COVID patients admitted. 60. Meanwhile, 10 hospitals in Idaho's Panhandle are already operating under crisis standards of care, have been for about a week, where they're ranking patients who get care by order of chance of survival. They're converting classroom space into critical care units like they've done at Kootenai Health in Coeur d'Alene. Making more space for sick patients is one thing, but having the staff to care for them is another. Those still making it work are requiring extra shifts, something they've been doing for a better part of a year and a half. And that, as you can imagine, has caused a lot of burnout. So now hospitals are having to care for more than double the number of patients with a reduced number of nurses and doctors and staff. And no, we're told this isn't about a vaccine requirement some hospitals have issued. Those 10 hospitals up north, they don't even have such mandates.
The hospitals continue to see a tremendous amount of stress, predominantly due to staffing constraints that they're experiencing. This is ubiquitous across the state, regardless of whether or not hospitals have vaccine requirement.
Regardless, well, understaffing has been an industry-wide problem for some time, so now it's an all-hands-on-deck kind of thing. The Department of Health and Welfare is deploying both clinical and non-clinical staff to help with these shortages, and that includes those from the Defense Department, the National Guard, AmeriCorps, and the Department of Labor. They've also given out millions of dollars to help keep staff on board, among other things they've tried to do. So the hospitals and their ICU beds are filling up and staying that way. Numbers are higher than we saw during last December's peak, as you take a look at that graph. And these are only the cases that are being reported. There are more than 50 hospitals in the state of Idaho, but not all of them report their numbers to the state every day. Let's take Saturday, for example. Only 34 hospitals submitted their data. The day before, 42. So it's kind of all over the place, which explains why some days we see a drop-off in numbers, then we see big jumps on other days. With that said, we saw a record number of hospitalizations last Friday, 626 people in the hospital with COVID-19. And that's even without all the hospitals reporting those numbers. During December, when we thought we were in the worst we'd see when it come to COVID, well, before a vaccine that was, remember? When crisis standards of care was also on the horizon, we had our worst day at 496 people in the hospital with COVID. And sure, not all of them are in critical care condition, but all of them still need help while they're in the hospital. And according to Director Jepsen, 91% of people currently in the hospital for COVID are unvaccinated. This graph doesn't even include the weekend numbers we mentioned, those 60, so it should be higher than that. But then again, some people do discharge from the hospital. But these new numbers won't come in for a few more minutes. How about those in critical care? Let's take a look at the ICU numbers in the last 2 months. The darker orange number you see on the right is showing where we are near the state capacity statewide. You see that big drop? That's because they started reporting those numbers differently right about July 3rd. Back on July 8th, we had about 156 ICU beds available across the state. Last Friday, on September 10th, we had just 6 beds available. These numbers are fluid and they only represent the number of staffed beds available at that moment in time. Beds consistently open back up, but then, as you also know, they quickly fill back up again. Now, a faint silver lining in all of this happened yesterday when Idaho broke the 50% barrier for vaccinations of those eligible, 12 and over. But that doesn't include the 300,000 or so of those under the age of 12. So these runaway hospital numbers, a big reason Boise Mayor Lauren McLean decided to make an announcement today. She decided to answer the question we've been getting a lot lately for like weeks. Will increasing COVID cases lead to new COVID restrictions? Yes, at least in Boise. As Mayor McLean said today, the city is taking action to cut down on the spread of the virus. And it's going to include new protocols on events permitted by the city, and it's going to go into effect on Friday. Too little? Too late? Joe Paris spoke with Mayor McLean today, and he joins us now because, you know, as we break this down, what the mayor did and did not do, why don't we first go over what these new protocols cover?
Yeah, let's cover the protocols, and then we'll have the conversation that the community's having right now. We're already seeing a lot of messages coming into the 208 text line. So let's be very clear here. All the requirements I'm going to talk about here in a second are only for events permitted by the city of Boise and held at city-owned facilities. So no, none of these that I'm going to talk about here in a second apply to the Boise State football game on Saturday. For events permitted by the city of Boise and held at city-owned facilities, there are two important designations here. Events under 250 people and events over 250 people. We'll show you these requirements here. For events under 250 people, masks are required both indoors and outdoors if 6 feet of physical distance cannot be maintained. Event organizers must provide masks for the attendees and make sure that the masks are being worn while people are not eating or drinking. And event organizers, they have to submit a plan through the city's special events approval process to make sure they even get the good to go. Designation number 2, events larger than 250 people. You'll see here very similar requirements. One thing I do want to point out at the top of the list there, this again just for events over 250 people, proof of vaccination or proof of negative COVID-19 test is required for all attendees. Of course, masks required there as well. You can see a very similar list. After the announcement this afternoon, we quickly saw community feedback, and a major question was along the lines of this one that we got from Doug. We'll show you here. He writes, the mayor comments on the concern about COVID-19, yet we have a mask rate at the BSU game of about 20% wore them. I'm no genius, Doug says, but simple math tells me we have some people 80% not enforcing anything, thus spreading the funk. So Doug, like others, are raising this point. Why did the mayor of Boise not go further on her action? For example, by instituting a mask policy citywide, so it would include events like Boise State football. Here's the response I got from Mayor McLean when I raised this question.
We've talked with doctors about it, the healthcare systems about it. We've looked at what would be the most impactful at this point if we want to ensure that we're reducing future cases of COVID while hospital counts remain high, and really believe that the most effective tool that we can take at this moment is on events. At this moment in time, we believe that given the continued increase in vaccination rates in Boise, which is much higher than the rest of the region, the cases and the location of cases and how closely tied they are to vaccination rates, and in Boise, the gathering of people from all those different locations in our city needs to be addressed by us looking at how we keep folks at events safe.
The mayor also called on the community to get vaccinated in Boise and beyond. Brian, it's a conversation we'd be having, as you heard the mayor allude to, that even if the city of Boise does X, Y, and Z, people still come in and out of the city every day. Right. One note I did want to mention, Mayor McLean, not by name, but she did call on, I guess, local and state officials saying that they have the ability to do more things blanket-wide. She didn't call for any specific action from Governor Brad Little, for example. But, I mean, the question is, will we see more in Boise and beyond? Well, if things continue to get worse, city leaders and state leaders, they may be forced to take action. The question is now, what could that look like?
And I want to clarify something. You said events permitted by the city of Boise. That means if you want to hold an event in a park, you have to get a permit from the city that has to be approved.
Correct.
That's what you mean, not just something that is allowed, but something you have to ask for permission to reserve a space in a park.
You can really think about this as house rules. If it's on the city of Boise property, it's their house. These are their house rules. If you're going to have a permitted event by the city of Boise on city of Boise property.
And then to be clear, Art in the Park did require masks this past weekend. Treefort is requiring vaccinations or proof of a negative test coming up. So now they will have to require masks?
Yeah, and actually Treefort put out a tweet this morning saying we're asking people to wear masks.
Okay.
So there you go.
So this is what it'll be like going forward. Thanks, Joe. Well, there are cities that are reissuing citywide mask mandates, by the way, just 5 months after rescinding their mask mandate. City of Haley is bringing it back. Last night, city council members voted unanimously to reinstate that citywide requirement as COVID cases continue to climb there as well. Starting today, masks must be worn in public spaces, which include grocery stores, movie theaters, salons, buses, government offices, libraries, etc., regardless of vaccination status. Then this morning, It went even further. Blaine County commissioners met and unanimously voted to issue their own indoor mask mandate countywide, and it's going to apply to all parts of unincorporated parts of the county. Right now, Blaine County, which has the highest vaccination rate of any county in Idaho, is at more than 80%. They're seeing new cases on average of about 37 a day. Haley's mask mandate will run through at least October 12th. Cities of Ketchum, Sun Valley, which are in Blaine County, they're going to vote on their own mask mandates later tonight. City of Victor in Teton County is the only other city in Idaho currently with a mask mandate. City of Boise does not have a mask mandate, but it is, I should say, for only government buildings that are within the city limits. Let me clarify that. City of Boise does have a mask mandate, but again, only for government buildings within city limits. Another system on the brink. No, not hospitals, but something that's been in a struggle for even longer. And if you've ever had to find and pay for childcare, you likely know the struggle. The cost of early childhood education comes directly from your pocket. How about you spend some time with us in a conversation by way of text? Tell us what's on your mind. Send us your questions and comments to the number on your screen, 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. We're going to share a few of them at the end of the show. Pandemic has been a big eye-opener for a lot of us in a lot of ways. While many of us were sent home in the early stages, some still working from home. For some parents, that meant working from home and also parenting simultaneously, which if you have kids, you can know how hard that can be. For many parents, it reinforced the essential role of childcare and early education learning. For those that are getting ready to head back to work, or maybe you already have and you're ready to send the kids back to daycare, daycare may not be ready for them because like most businesses around the country, most of them are experiencing a staffing shortage. And that's on top of a system, according to one expert you're going to hear from, that's always been broken. Here's Katya Stepovic.
Good for you, John. Good for you.
While the pandemic forced a lot of parents to pull their kids out of daycare,
Look at these ones. Look at, there's big rocks.
now many are busy back at work, even if that means working from your living room.
I mean, how can you work from home even when you have a young child? They need nurturing, they need things, and it's hard to do. But then you're also faced with, you know, that parental guilt.
According to Melissa Buck, the owner of Vista Montessori School in Boise, an overwhelming amount of parents are seeking childcare, but she can't take on more children, and she says it's not because her facility is full.
We have openings right now that I can't fill because I don't have enough staff to fill our school, so I'm turning people away and we're back to a year-long wait list.
Buck says because a majority of parents pulled their kids out of daycare during the pandemic, some employees also quit or were let go because of the pandemic's uncertainty. And as much as they may have loved their jobs, these employees are not flocking back.
Our payroll is probably 75% of our budget, and even with that being said, we can't charge enough to pay enough to compete with jobs like even Amazon and T-Mobile are starting at $20 an hour.
A convenience store, if you're not making profit, you raise the cost of a candy bar, and people will pay that. In childcare, if you raise the cost of the service, it goes on the backs of families. So you've got this catch-22 where childcare programs can't afford to make any less, but families can't afford to make it or pay any more. And so what gives?
Beth Oppenheimer, executive director of the Idaho Association for the Education of Younger Children, says hourly rates for employees working in childcare are anywhere from $9 to $11, and infant care has risen to $1,000 a month.
In the childcare industry, there's less hope than I've ever seen before. And you know, we have childcare providers who have been in this business for 25 years and have never experienced what they're experiencing now. And it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Because of the lack of staff, daycares are trying to up their hourly wage to compete with other industries. Meanwhile, according to a recent survey, 91% of childcare providers in the state of Idaho are experiencing staff shortages, which has a ripple effect.
It impacts our economy, it impacts our communities, it impacts our moms and dads' ability to go to work, it impacts child development.
While there are some federal funds that support low-income families to pay for childcare, Oppenheimer says not many families in Idaho even qualify for it. And for some, the cost of childcare can be higher than their mortgage. Couple that with the daycare's year-long wait list, and parents are now turning down jobs so they can look over their kids at home.
Historically, the business community, our business leaders, have looked at childcare and said, that's a family issue. We're not going to talk about that. But what they're understanding and realizing is their employees, they can't come to work and they can't hire and retain a qualified workforce because the people that they want to hire can't find childcare.
Because of that, she says the business community is starting to think about childcare differently compared to a few years ago. So maybe, just maybe, there is hope.
This isn't a new problem. This has just been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so hopefully this will just kind of make some change for our industry and people will see that this is a problem.
Oppenheimer said that some childcare facilities are so desperate to hire right now that they're just hiring people who can simply pass a background check. But there is a way that other businesses can help out. They can offer childcare benefits for employees or pay for some slots, which is mutually beneficial, right? It's appealing for a new candidate who is also a parent and will help the childcare industry be able to offer more competitive wages.
Yeah, and in this day and age when it's, double income households, you need people to take care of your child. And as you mentioned, there might be a company out there that's big enough that can provide that, but it's still going to be a struggle for those companies or working for a company that I guess can't offer that sort of incentive, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going back to work because they have to right now and they can't look over their children because of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. We got people looking for people to work. You can't go back because you can't afford the child care. It's just going to keep running in a circle. All right, thank you very much, Katya. Politicians like to endear themselves to whatever group they find themselves among. I mean, that's no secret. A tidbit, a story, something that connects them to their audience. Something that says, I know about you. We have shared experiences. Which explains why President Joe Biden said this yesterday during his 2-hour stop at the National Interagency Fire Center.
I used to tell Frank Church this. My first job offer where my wife, deceased wife, and I wanted to move to Idaho because we think, not a joke, it's such a beautiful, beautiful state. And I interviewed for a job with Boise Cascade. And in the meantime, there was a war going on. Anyway, but the whole point was that I used to always kid Frank.
Well, President Biden tried to get a job at Boise Cascade, right? Well, obviously he didn't take it because that's not where he is now. One of the cool things we learned from Biden's brief time in Boise yesterday. But that 25-second anecdote that was then fact-checked by the New York Post. And they came out with this about an hour later, tweeting, Biden claims first job offer from Idaho Lumber Company, but it's news to them. The Post said they reached out to the company, Boise Cascade, and were told, we have no record of President Biden's application or of him having worked for the company. We checked our system internally and nothing has turned up. And that tweet, that headline, was picked up and passed around social media and other partisan outlets, lining it up against other times that President Biden claimed things that weren't exactly true. So therefore, this also must not be true. But buried deep in that article was this nugget from the company spokesperson, Lisa Champel. We had a diverse portfolio in the 60s and early 70s, so my guess is any records have been purged or transferred for the business's projects we are no longer involved in. So that headline, it's news to them, well, the company has no record of it. It's a bit misleading. And we get it. It's the New York Post. That's kind of what they do. But let's break this down with a little help from the Boise Cascade Company. It was formed in 1957 when the Boise Payette Lumber Company and the Cascade Lumber Company, they merged to become Boise Cascade. At that time, known as Boise Cascade Corporation. And in those early years, they had a very diverse portfolio. According to Champel, not just forest products. They had businesses that were under the umbrella that included concrete, plastics, textiles, even motorhome manufacturing. And over the years, those branches were, well, trimmed. And when that happened, the new owners would get all the records and the paperwork that went with them. Then in the early 2000s, the company went through some restructuring. Remember when they bought OfficeMax and changed their name to that? Remember that? Well, that didn't last long because in 2004, OfficeMax sold the paper, forest products, and timber interest to a private equity firm who then renamed those assets Boise Cascade LLC. So imagine the paper trail, no pun intended, to find records from the early 70s, which is basically the answer we got from Boise Cascade today when we asked for some clarification on that. And adding to that brief trip down memory lane, Champel told us today the company went public as Boise Cascade Company in 2013. So, long story short, Boise Cascade Company does not have job applications from 50 years ago. So we can neither prove nor disprove President Biden's statement. So unless President Biden has kept a hard copy of every job offer he's ever had, well, it's likely going to remain unproven. Or does it matter? We'd be remiss if we didn't remind you, though, of this thread as well. And maybe this Boise Cascade connection will help some of you sleep at night. In 2005, NBC began airing a television show called The Office. Yep, it was a show about paper products company. And in the show, Boise Cascade products, then known simply as Boise, right there, were prominently displayed in several episodes, like this one, where they come up with a jingle for a commercial and Daryl plays his keyboard on top of those said boxes. Well, in The Office, Dunder Mifflin is located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the hometown of a future president who claims to have once had a job offer from Boise Cascade. The layers are endless. All right, a lot of you sending in messages saying things like BSU had a mask requirement in their stadium, so did Art in the Park, and didn't see a lot of masks being worn at either of those events, which is why Joe and Eagle sent this in. Until a few tickets or fines are handed out, none of these mandates have any teeth. That's a good point, Joe.